All right, welcome back to Live Impact News. We are, as promised, joined by a special guest here in the studio. Neisha Himes joins us. She's a domestic violence education specialist. And we've been hanging out here getting ready for this interview a little bit. We really appreciate you taking
Thank
some
you.
time. How's everything for you on this Monday?
I'm doing pretty good. How about yourself?
Okay, good. Not too bad.
Not too
We've
bad.
been pretty smooth through the stream so far. So everything good as far as we can tell. Now, I want to start a little bit with some stuff that you've accomplished here in the area. You've worked in Norfolk on this. You've worked in Newport News on this, oftentimes working with the city to try and raise awareness and create a safer environment for people who are impacted by domestic violence. Right. I'm wondering, when you work with the city of Norfolk or the city of Newport News, what's kind of the most important thing that you look to impress upon those officials about domestic violence that might happen in their city?
I would say one of the most important things, because there's so many and none more important than the other, but that is not something that we can just will away or pretend that it's not happening just because we don't see it or don't want to acknowledge that we're seeing it doesn't mean that the issue is going to go away. So until we actually sit and use our power and our resources to do something about it, it's going to continue.
Yeah, and you mentioned something really interesting there, which is with this particular problem, maybe there's a tendency to, like you said, ignore it.
Right.
Or hope that it'll just go away on its own. As compared to maybe some other things where we see there's more of a front-facing tackling of the issue. Why do you think this issue is one that kind of people just have trouble confronting and want it to just go away on its own?
Because it's easier to pretend that it's not happening. It's happening in our homes. It's happening in our schools. It's happening in our faith-based organizations. It's happening outside the four walls of our neighbor's house or our colleague's house. And it's not difficult to have conversations like this, because then you have to look at yourself and say, well, how am I part of the problem? Whether I am the person who's perpetuating the abusive behavior, if I'm the person that is being a non-active bystander, if I'm someone that I know someone who's doing this and I'm not allowing them or doing my part to help them take some accountability for it. So it's just easier to push it under the rug, put it behind that door, behind those closed curtains, and just say, okay, this has nothing to do with me, when actually it does.
Now let's start there. If you're someone who is a friend or a family member of someone who you have observed is in this type of situation, is a victim of domestic violence that has yet to, become in a safer situation. How do you approach, as a friend or a family member who sees what's happening and wants to help in the best way they can to make sure everyone stays safe?
Well, the first thing we need to stop doing is asking the number one question that most people ask, which I'm sure you can guess, and that's the "why don't you just leave?" question, because there's so many different nuances, there's so many different reasons why a victim survivor of domestic violence cannot just simply leave. One being, the most dangerous time for a victim of domestic violence is when they're trying to leave or have recently left. That is the highest chance of lethality. It nearly doubles. And when you have lack of resources, whether that's financial, whether that's shelter, housing, whether it's childcare, medical coverage, or anything along those lines, it's really so difficult. And I'm not saying that just as an advocate or a specialist, but as a survivor myself. So the first thing to do is to listen without judgment, to ask open-ended questions. Instead of saying, why don't you just leave? It's asking, what are the barriers preventing you from getting to safety, and how can I help you overcome those barriers? Because then maybe you will find out that it's lack of transportation, no employment, lack of childcare, and then be able to take the steps needed to help provide support. Maybe it's connecting them with the amazing shelters and resources in the area. Maybe it's packing an emergency bag for them and having it in your home or in the trunk of your car. Maybe it's putting $5 or $10 aside every other week or so that you can help them get that emergency phone or help them get to a hotel for the evening. But above all, first and foremost, is listening without judgment, understanding that it's their decision whatever happens, the survivor is the expert in their situation, and then seeing how you can provide your support from there.
Yeah, I mean, it's great advice, and that's, for friends or family who are seeing this happen. When it comes to law enforcement who become involved in a situation like this, you very specifically worked with the Newport News Police Department. You helped establish their first domestic violence unit.
Yes.
When you are working with law enforcement, how are you advising them in terms of how they should approach this situation? And how is it different from maybe a different type of call they would get to go and help with something?
Well, when it comes to domestic related calls, those are some of the most dangerous calls, if not the most dangerous call for law enforcement to respond to. So in working with the officers, whether it was in Newport News or beyond, it's you got to meet people where they are. Learn what they know about domestic violence, what they think about it. Because when you've worked in a space, when you are witnessing trauma day in and day out, you can become jaded. You can just look at things from a black and white lens. And then saying, hey, domestic violence is beyond you show up to this home and you see broken furniture and bruises and things like that. It's listening to what that survivor is telling you. If they're saying my partner is monitoring my whereabouts with the local, Ring app or GPS tracker, and to say, okay, hey, there might be some control and isolation going on there. So it's talking to them and teaching them how to speak in a trauma-informed, person-centered, healing-centered way. It's getting them to see beyond the black and white, and the goal is to be more proactive than reactive. I know you guys don't want to respond to those scenes, just like we don't want there to be scenes for you to respond to. So it's, if you see something, just even if you can't make an arrest, even if you can't do something in that moment, doing something, maybe simply offering a hotline number, saying, hey, this just doesn't seem right. I'm a little bit concerned, and I would like you to talk to someone who is a little bit more, who specializes in this area and able to provide you that assistance, because that can save lives just like that, just then and there, just being able to provide a lifeline before it gets to the point where you're responding to homicides or malicious woundings and things of the like.
Yeah, and you mentioned something interesting there, which is monitoring where someone has been, tracking their location, just generally that control.
Yes.
I think when people think domestic violence, their first thought is physical violence, which is obviously a major factor here. Can you talk about some of the other aspects of domestic violence that go beyond just the physical part of it?
Yes. I'm so glad you asked that. Oh my goodness, because there's so many different types of domestic violence, intimate partner violence. You do not go on your first date and this person physically assaults you. That rarely, if ever, happens, and then that's your indicator, just like, oh my gosh, this person is abusive. It's not how it works. It often starts off with we need to talk about the love bombing, when someone's showering you with attention and gifts very, very, very early in a relationship, where it almost feels like it's moving too fast, and almost that if it's too good to be true, it most likely is. You have the gaslighting, the manipulation, the control. Financial abuse is prevalent in 99% of domestic violence cases. So if I'm controlling your access to financial resources to be able to provide for yourself and be independent, if I'm not allowing you to work, if I'm not allowing you to go to school to advance, if I'm tracking your whereabouts with Apple AirTags or Ring apps, or controlling who you talk to on the phone or on social media, the list goes on and on and on. Verbal abuse, emotional abuse. The law will say it's not illegal to call someone a name, but that doesn't mean it's not a form of abuse that can lead to something more dangerous and more severe later on down the line.
And just hearing you kind of go through a lot of those symptoms, it makes me wonder, how often do you encounter victims of domestic violence who are just not aware that they're in that situation?
Yes. Even for myself, you grow up and you're taught that domestic violence looks a certain way, and you're taught that it's not going to be you. If you think that it's going to be just a woman who's cowering in a corner, when we know it can affect men as well. It can affect, no matter the age. It can start off as early as 11, 12 years old. I've talked to kids in abusive relationships, and those are elderly, 70 plus years old, who are in abusive relationships as well. People with PhDs and GEDs, so it literally knows no zip code. It doesn't care what's in your bank account. It doesn't care where you live. it has so many different faces. I can't tell you how many different shades, sizes, types I've seen throughout the years. But that's the biggest misconception, is that you can just point out in a room, that person will probably go through domestic violence and that person never will, and that's not true.
Yeah, and then you mentioned love bombing.
Yes.
This is something that I only recently became aware of as a term over the last 2 or 3 years even. I'm wondering if we can stay on that. Is there any way you can expand on that?
Sure.
Not only what that looks like, but specifically why it's dangerous, because I think a lot of people will hear that or see that and think that it, oh, what's wrong with that? Over loving someone, but it has there's real issues that come with that.
Right. So the thing about abuse is about power and control. That is the main thing. If there's one thing you take away from what I said today, abuse is about power and control. And the thing about love bombing is that it allows you to put your guard down. If you have someone and you meet them and they're just showering you with the gifts and the flowers and the compliments, and you're just feeling just really warm and fuzzy and all the good things that we like to feel when you first meet someone. And then the goal is to drop these breadcrumbs, get you to lower your I don't want to say wall, but just make you trust them a little earlier than normal. And then when they start doing things such as telling you who to hang out with, telling you where you can go, telling you who you can see. And the thing about it is they've already got you, hooked you in the beginning. And then when the abusive tactics start happening, or control, the manipulation, well, you already remember what this person was like when they were doing the nice things for you and when they were being loving and doting. So you want to get that attention back. It's a cycle of up and down, and what it does to you, it makes you feel like, okay, maybe if I'm a little less of this and more of that, then this person won't be angry with me. Maybe if I answer the calls when they say so and show up when they say so, then they won't be upset with me because I don't recognize this person right now. I remember the person who showed up at my door after date number 2 with flowers and candy, and it's not to be misconstrued with courting. That's okay, but it's about power and control. What's the intent behind the person's gifts and the affection and all of that?
Right. I think that's why it's important to talk about, because there is that line, and it's okay to court someone, but it's not okay to love bomb them as a forms of gaining control or of manipulation. I'm wondering, as you say that, is there a sort of a common concept of victims in situations like the one you just described when they are being controlled? Is there a thought process of, oh, he or she is just doing this because they love me?
Yes, that's a great question too, because again, if you have this thought that domestic violence looks a certain way, and you're not taught about the early signs. And something I always say is, once they get you mentally, the rest is easy. So if I've convinced you that I'm doing this because of you, whether it's I'm calling you out your name because of you, or I'm angry with you because of you, but you remember the good times. And that is another misconception, that when it comes to abusive relationship, that every day is bad and every day is abusive and every day is filled with just anger and hurt and pain. And that's not true. There are good days. There's the inside jokes. There's the funny moments. There's times when you've been there for each other and supported one another. And that's where it creates this bond. It's been likened to someone with a substance use disorder trying to quit cold turkey. That's what it takes to try to leave an abusive relationship. It literally rewires your brain. So it's just this thought that, maybe if I can just get this person to love me again and be nice 100% instead of just turning around and snapping, or maybe it's my fault, then it's just a vicious cycle.
Yeah, and we talk about that cycle, and a lot of how we've approached it is recognizing when this might be happening, how to help. I'm wondering, once you have someone who has been fortunate to get help and is now someone who's in recovery, what's the best way to approach a family or friend who has gotten out of the situation, but obviously that doesn't mean it just ends in terms of how it could impact you. How should friends or family approach someone who's been a victim of this?
Again, starting with just that non-judgmental, I'm listening, I'm here for you, being open-minded in understanding, or even if you don't understand, respect what they're telling you. You know, it takes a victim of domestic violence 7 to 10 attempts to leave before they leave for good.
Wow.
And that doesn't mean you're assaulted 7 times, if you're even physically assaulted, but that doesn't mean you're assaulted 7 times and then you say, you know what, well, it's about time for me to go. You could have been assaulted in this abusive relationship, verbally, emotionally, sexually, financially, whichever, for a year or two before you make the first attempt, another 6 months before the second attempt. So when you put it in that context, it takes a lot for someone to leave a situation like that, especially when there's fear, especially when the threat of danger increases in frequency and severity when you're trying to leave. So just understanding it took a lot for this person to leave. It takes a lot to stay. Mm-hmm. So how can I be a support system in that? We see, survivors see, even years removed from it, we see what people say online. We see the victim blaming. You hear it. You think that your loved one isn't paying attention, and they are. And sometimes that makes them have the decision whether or not they'll come to you. They may hear the jokes that you're saying about whether you see things in the news or on the media, and you'll say to yourself, well, I know that that person is not a safe space. Mm-hmm. So you have to look at yourself. Am I a safe space if somebody comes to me and needs help?
7 to 10 attempts that's a shocking statistic.
Yes.
I mean, that is over time. I mean,
yes.
that is a real, you are trying to leave.
You are trying.
It's much more difficult.
Yes.
Someone who's never been in that situation may think it's easy, but
right.
It's not easy.
Right.
And there's a lot at play there. Naya, I'm wondering if you have any questions. I know this is a topic we've talked about. Do you have any questions for Nisha?
No, I don't have any questions. This has been very insightful, though.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you also spoke at a panel that I was at, and I learned a lot from there as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm wondering, just from a personal standpoint,
yes.
Everything that you are doing now to help,
yes.
what has this been like for you? Has it been fulfilling? Has it been harder than you thought it was gonna be? What's your goals? I mean, where are you with this journey where you are really trying to plant your flag as someone who's creating change in this type of thing?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, something I always say, I will not shut up. That is a motto of mine. I remember my ex would always tell me to shut up. Nobody cares what you're saying, doesn't care how you feel or anything. So I am so passionate about this as a survivor, but having worked in a community-based advocacy, systems-based advocacy, and being fortunate to see it from so many different vantage points. Mm-hmm. I mean, from inside and outside, and being able to use my voice to be able to impart some sort of change. And I think what drives me and that I'm proud of most is being authentic. Mm-hmm. I'm going to say it. I'm sitting here today because it's just like, I'm going to say it. I don't care if I'm at the grocery store, the post office, or wherever. So for me, it's just been really fulfilling. It can be very emotionally draining, especially with everything going on just today. I mean, it's been a really, really, really heavy week for just survivors and people who are in this space. So it's something that you just got to be mindful of, give yourself the grace and the space, and then just keep going.
Yeah, and for, there's a couple things that are going to stand out to me from this interview. One, multiple times approaching without judgment.
Yes.
When it comes to trying to help, I think is something that will really stand out. The concept of power and control and all of the different ways that can look has really stood out to me. I'm wondering if there's someone who's watching at home and they've never been involved with a situation like this, and they don't have immediate friends or family who they're looking to help, but they see this cause and they want to be a part of the solution. Mm-hmm. What's the best way that someone could do that?
That's a great thing. A great friend of mine, she always says, just because it hasn't happened to you doesn't mean it shouldn't matter to you. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't mean that, honestly, survivors shouldn't be the only ones, in this fight. We can't just do it alone. So just finding out how you can help, whether that's contacting the local domestic violence agency. We have several right here in the area, and finding out what they need. Sometimes it's helping them clean one of the safe houses. Sometimes it's financial assistance. Sometimes it's dropping off toiletries. If you are someone who has a trade, perhaps you're a mechanic or a handyman. Survivors, when you're looking for someone slashed your tires and maybe they broke your windshield and now you need someone who would be willing to fix it, or your door was kicked in and you need someone to help change your locks, or whatever it may be. Perhaps you have a cleaning service and you just want to pamper a survivor, clean their home for a day. There's so many different ways, out of the box ways that people can help. If you work at a food pantry, once a month, maybe having a drive where you're donating to shelters in the area. We all can do something. So it just takes reaching out and saying, hey, this is what I can do, and how can what I can do help you?
Yeah. Awesome. Well, just because it hasn't happened to you doesn't mean it shouldn't matter to you. Is
Correct.
that?
Yes.
Yeah, we're stealing that.
Yes, you should. I think
that.
she might be watching, so
That was
she'll
great.
know. Yes.
No,
steal away.
that was
Your
awesome.
website,
Yes.
how they can contact you.
Oh, yes. So my website is www.nishachristine.com, and there I provide some information as it relates to domestic violence, intimate partner violence, trauma as a whole. And again, I speak everywhere regarding this issue, whether it's your local school, whether it's a faith-based organization, whether it's a rally in Walmart parking lot, whatever I can do, I'll do it.
And that is the website on your
Absolutely.
screen right now, neishachristine.com.
Yep.
If you want to get in touch with more resources or follow Christine's journey, figure out more ways to help, and any way that you can help is greatly appreciated in this type of situation.
Thank you.
Nisha Christine, we really appreciate
I
you coming
appreciate
in and
you.
spending some time with us.
Thank
And
you.
good luck with everything you're doing. I
Thank you
know
so
that
much.
it's well needed. So.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
All
Thank
right.
you.
So Neisha Christine Himes in the building, actually here in studio. A lot of Zoom interviews for us recently. It's nice to, yes, it's
I
nice
said
to
I'll
have
pull
you
up.
here.
Yeah,
That's right.
I'll
That's
pull
right.
up. Yeah.
And hopefully we'll see you again down the road.
Absolutely. Thank
Okay.
you.
A special opportunity for us here on Live Impact News.